Animal protein and red meat even is a part of a healthy human diet. As the clinical nutritionist for the Body Reset program, I can tell you that one of the fundamental principles of what we use with clients is increasing their protein intake, and predominantly that comes from animal proteins. And overwhelmingly, we see a positive effect when people do this because it meets key biological needs. But I realize that there is a lot of controversy and a lot of emotion attached to this topic. There's a lot of biases out there, and that creates some, resistance for people, some hesitation on this topic. So I want to share with you a lens that I've used for a lot of these more, emotionally charged or biased topics in the nutrition space, of which there are a lot. Nutrition is a very interesting field. And so the lens that I use when looking at these more emotionally charged topics is, what does history tell us and what does human biology tell us? So what have humans done throughout history, and what do we biologically need as a human to be healthy and to survive and thrive in, throughout life? So if we put this lens over red meat intake, over animal protein intake for a minute, we're going to find some really interesting things. So first up is history. Humans have eaten meat for a very, very long time. The rise in chronic disease does not match a significant rise in protein intake. We've always eaten protein. That hasn't changed all that much through the years, but chronic disease has changed, has progressed, has increased. So why are we blaming the meat when that's not really changed? There's not really a correlation there. So history tells us maybe the meat's not the problem, maybe it's the buns and the fries that we have it with, okay, and the Coke that we have on the side. And then if we look at it through the context of human need, what does a human need to be healthy? Well, there's two components to this. One is, as we age, our protein need increases. This is because we become somewhat anabolic resistant. Our ability to build new muscle mass, to build new tissue, to create new structures in our body actually decreases, and we need a higher amount of protein intake to meet that need. That is a well-established fact in the research. That's not an argued fact at all. Our protein need increases with age, and because our digestive capacity somewhat slows, we might have some more issues with actually absorbing what we eat. We actually may need to eat even more to get that amount of protein that we need to provide the amino acid building blocks for our body to survive and thrive and rebuild and all that as we're aging. So our protein need increase with age. And the other part is, what are the biggest drivers of ill health today? They are metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is a collection of things like type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, those sorts of things. And the big driver of metabolic syndrome is not too much protein intake. In fact, increasing protein intake helps all of those conditions of metabolic syndrome. The real key issue with metabolic syndrome is around excess energy consumption, particularly in the form of carbohydrates, which elevates blood sugar levels and elevates insulin levels. So again, the question is begged, why are we blaming meat for something? Chronic disease, those chronic diseases have increased. Meat is part of helping those because it provides protein rather than carbohydrates. And then there's a question, an equation that happens here, because if you take protein out of someone's diet, that energy amount that you're removing has to be replaced with something else. And more often than not, when we take away protein, it gets replaced with carbohydrates. There's an energy kind of need that needs to be met, and so more often than not that will end up coming from either higher fat or higher processed foods or higher carbohydrate intake on the whole. And for people with metabolic issues where blood sugar is already an issue, insulin resistance is already an issue, increasing that may not be the thing that's helpful for them, especially in an aging population, right? So we need to be not only considering, is meat good or bad for us, but what does taking it away actually do to our, nutrition structure, to the composition of the diet and the food that we are eating. So there's another component here to the protein intake as well, is that if you take protein intake, you're removing a very nutrient dense food. So along with the protein, the amino acids that we get when we eat red meat, when we eat, chicken and fish and those sorts of things, we get a whole lot of really important minerals and vitamins, your B12, your zinc, selenium, those sorts of things, omega-3 fatty acids. When we take protein out, we're removing our opportunity to get these, and as well, our needs for these are high. They're harder to get from plant foods, and they're not so rich in a lot of these carbohydrate loaded foods. So we're removing a opportunity to get nutrition that might be helpful for supporting our brain function and our energy levels and our recovery and our hormones and all those sorts of things as we age as well. So when we put that lens of human need over red meat, we actually see there's a positive effect there because it's meeting a whole lot of the requirements for a lot of these chronic conditions that are going on. Now you could argue, well, maybe we can do that with plant proteins, and for a very small amount of people, yes, this is possible. But what we have to realize is when you meet your protein needs with plant proteins, you get a whole lot of carbohydrates on the side because the legumes and whatnot have a smaller amount of protein than say some red meat or some chicken, and they're partially carbohydrates. So you can meet the protein need, but you get this very high carbohydrate amount, and you have to factor that in because carbohydrates are part of that component of driving those metabolic conditions. So is that helpful in the grand scheme of things? Potentially not. Now, we've worked with a lot of clients through the Body Reset program now, and like I said at the start, we've seen across the board consistent positive effect with increasing animal protein intake because it meets nutritional needs, it meets amino acid and protein needs, it keeps the carbohydrate amount of meals lower so that you're really providing the building blocks without over providing energy. We consistently see things improve, like blood markers improve, energy improve, hormones improve, weight improve, and all of those things that really correlate to improved health outcomes in the long term. And I know right now, listening to this, there's probably a lot of questions coming up for you. But what about that thing I watched? Or what about that article I read that said this, that, or the other thing? And there's a couple of key things I want to leave with you here. There are no good studies that have been done comparing low protein diets or plant protein diets with animal protein diets in the context of whole food, okay? The only thing that they've looked at is population-based study where they just look at the amount of protein, not taking into account where the protein is coming from. Is it coming from a McDonald's burger where there was Coke on the side? These things need to be factored in when we're looking at this discussion. So there's no good studies that suggest that protein is a problem, animal protein is a problem for humans. We've eaten meat for thousands of years, right? It meets our biological needs, and our needs for it increase as we age, and it is shown to help improve the chronic conditions that are causing us issues today. So as a clinical nutritionist, as someone who's worked with thousands of clients now and has seen the positive benefits of protein intake, looking at it through my two lenses of human history and biological needs for health, I believe that protein, animal protein, is part of a healthy human diet. And if you are looking at your amounts of protein and you are increasing your animal protein intake, you're likely going to feel better and see some blood markers improve as well. Hopefully this was helpful, guys. See you later.